If you want to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page to gain access to exclusive videos, take part in Q&As, and watch my retrospectives before they go live on YouTube.
You look a little paler than usual, boy.
You play rough.
Well, it ain't all basketball and dishwashers out here.
I could get you an interview with a Times Square pimp. This guy is not just a flesh peddler. This guy goes through 10 grand a week like that. I'm talking about a lifestyle piece. Lifestyle of a pimp. In 2,000 words, I am gonna look into this man's skull. Listen, tell me something. You work for anybody in particular?
No.
Oh, come on. You don't have a man? Come on, you gotta have somebody who runs protection for you, lines up the hotel, buys you clothes, right? Why is it I can't get anybody to talk to me out here?
Look, I gotta go.
This is fantastic. Where'd you get all this stuff?
Easy.
You made it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrific. It's first rate. It's a real breakthrough.
Jonathan Fisher?
Yeah? What do you want?
The district attorney and I have reason to doubt that the subject of your story is actually named Tyrone.
Uh-oh. You're the thought police. You're gonna arrest me for getting a name wrong.
Murder is a pretty serious crime, wouldn't you say?
Well, there's nothing in that story about a murder.
No, not a murder, a murderer. As in killer, under indictment. Now, you and I both know that the subject of this story is actually one Leo Smalls, also known as Fast Black.
No, I'm sorry. I don't know who that is.
Don't jerk me around, and don't protect the killer.
Just wait a minute, okay? That is a feature story. Now, you think your pimp's the only guy in town?
What's wrong with you, man? You're stealing my shot.
You're Fast Black, aren't you?
I take the bread. The hold off, you understand? You want money, you come to me.
Hey, take it easy.
Yeah?
Can I go to jail for this?
If you tamper with evidence, if I even think...
I told you that I don't have any notes.
Is that right? Is that gonna help the next one he kills?
You want me to leave you alone? I'll blow your brains out right now.
I'm dead. You're dead.
You're real good with words, ain't you?
This is Jonathan Fisher, Channel 3, Street Smart.
In late March of 1987, Street Smart arrived on the big screen, with little to no marketing from Cannon Films. Produced on a budget of $5 million, it only grossed over $1 million in the USA. It's unclear how it performed worldwide, but judging by Cannon's lack of interest, it would have had similar results. It did receive a number of different posters, but that's as far as it went to sell the film to different markets. Despite its poor reception at the box office, it was praised by critics, especially the performance of Morgan Freeman, who plays as the pimp Fast Black. Roger Ebert awarded it 3 stars out of 4, saying sometimes you run across a movie that's far from perfect, and yet it contains things that are so good they take your breath away. Street Smart is a movie like that. A clever thriller with a lot of unbelievable scenes and a sappy ending, but 2 wonderful performances by Morgan Freeman and Kathy Baker. Richard Harrington of the Washington Post gave it a more mixed review. Like Ebert, praised Morgan's performance, but also highlighted Christopher Reeve's role as Jonathan Fisher, saying Reeve's character is no Clark Kent or Seymour Hersh, but a cynical, opportunistic writer, quick to make ethical and moral compromises and sell out to the highest bidder. The part is a welcome change of pace for the actor of Steel, who comes across as an unlikable, unscrupulous cad, but criticised the story and direction of Jerry Schatzberg, saying the film was flat and it had a lethargic pace and a strained plot. Morgan Freeman would go on to receive an Academy Award nomination for a supporting role, but lost out to Sean Connery for his part in The Untouchables. Since its release, Street Smart has largely been forgotten. Of course, it's a movie that is highlighted for kickstarting Freeman's career, but also the film that became the jumping-off point for Christopher Reeve to return as Superman. But like Street Smart, Superman 4 would suffer a similar fate, doing damage to Christopher Reeve's career as a leading man. In 1985, Christopher Reeve wasn't getting the roles he wanted, and the roles he had taken on didn't perform well at the box office. Warner Brothers were pressuring him to do another Superman film, but Chris was unsure after publicly saying he wouldn't play the part again, after Superman 3 got mixed reviews. He wanted to avoid being typecast and wanted to stretch his wings playing other roles, but these jobs came at a monetary loss. Taking parts that interested him, he often took a pay cut. His agent and Hollywood saw him as an action star, but Chris felt the scripts he was being offered were poor. The one role he wanted was the running man, but lost out to Arnold Schwarzenegger. Chris had decided to change agents and signed on with ICM, and their first deal came with Cannon Films. The Cannon Group had leased the rights to produce motion pictures on The Man of Steel from the Salkinds in 1985, but in order to make a fourth film happen, they needed Christopher Reeve to sign on. Reeve's agent knew Cannon's situation, so he sought to make a deal with the studio to Chris's benefit. Number 1, absolute control of the script to Superman 4. Number 2, at least part of the directing responsibilities. Number 3, another picture to be made first. Chris could choose the script as part of the deal. And finally, number 4, a fee of $4 million for both movies. After some negotiating with the Cannon Group, Chris got the deal he wanted. In his biography, Still Me, Chris mentioned how Street Smart came about. In early 1986, he was looking for a decent film project and came across a script called Street Smart, written by David Freeman, on his bookshelf. It had been sitting there for years. Chris couldn't remember where it came from. As he reread it, he liked it immediately and wondered why he hadn't responded to it before. Street Smart was originally advertised in the Filmways Pictures 1980/1981 trade brochure as due for production in spring of 1981. With Sidney Pollack attached as producer under the title of Streets of New York, but this was eventually cancelled. He told Cannon that Street Smart would be his first project with them. They agreed in desperation to kickstart Superman 4. Jerry Schatzberg, who had directed the gritty urban drama Panic in Needle Park with Al Pacino, was brought in to direct. The role of Fast Black was offered to Danny Glover, but he turned it down, not wanting to play another unsympathetic character after The Colour Purple. Jerry knew of an actor who wasn't getting the recognition that he deserved, and his only steady job at the time was playing Easy Reader on the Electric Company, and that would be Morgan Freeman. So for the cast, we have Christopher Reeve playing Jonathan Fisher, a magazine reporter who was struggling to pitch his next idea and decides to report on the seedy underbelly of prostitution and pimps. Chris did his own research and accompanied New York Vice City cops on their rounds for a few weeks, making friends with pimps and prostitutes. It really opened his eyes to how the business worked. Once some of the ladies noticed it was Superman, he started getting a lot of offers at a discount and even freebies. Chris knew he was taking a risk making this film that was intended for a hard R rating, and was unsure if audiences would accept him playing a weasel who only redeems himself by the end. Morgan Freeman plays Leo Smalls Jr., aka Fast Black. Despite having appeared in the Electric Company during the 1970s, Freeman considered Fast Black to be his breakthrough role. He also considers the part to be his favourite Oscar-nominated performance. Morgan Freeman didn't like how pimps were portrayed in movies with outlandish outfits. He said it wasn't realistic, so he asked the costume department to buy loads of Armani, which resulted in wiping out the department's budget. Kathy Baker plays Punchy, who Jonathan meets in efforts to gain information about her pimp. As she begins to fall for Jonathan, she begins to want a change in life, to get away from Fast Black. Kathy's first role was in The Right Stuff. She also appeared in Edward Scissorhands. She has largely focused her acting career on TV. The role of Punchy was originally intended for Diane Wiest. Mimi Rogers stars as Alison Parker, Jonathan's girlfriend, who does her best to support his research, but begins to see he is taking too many risks as he attempts to cover his tracks. The year of the film's release, she married Tom Cruise. Their marriage only lasted a couple of years. She had introduced Tom to Scientology. Mimi has split her career between TV and film. She has appeared in a number of films that have been received very well critically, but have sadly underperformed at the box office. Andre Gregory plays Ted Avery, the publisher of the New York Journal. Andre appeared in The Mosquito Coast, The Last Temptation of Christ, The Bonfire of the Vanities, and had a small role in Demolition Man. Jay Patterson plays Leonard Pike, who's prosecuting Fast Black for murder. He believes Jonathan's story is related to Black and wants Jonathan's notes, but he is unwilling to help. Jay has appeared in a lot of TV shows and movies, such as Hard Rain, Ted 2, and I'm sure many of you will recognise him as Danny's dad from the live-action Turtles movie. And last but not least, we have Eric King as Reggie, Fast Black's close friend and assistant. Eric's career as an actor took off in the 90s, appearing in films such as Stay Tuned, Desperate Measures, National Treasure, and TV shows such as Oz, Dexter, and The Oath. When it came to shooting, director Jerry Schatzberg and Christopher Reeve wanted to shoot the film in New York City, where the story is set, but the Cannon Group insisted the picture to be shot in Montreal, Quebec, in order to save costs. Cannon was starting to break at the seams that year, with dozens of films in production, with many not performing well at the box office. The studio had invested in huge sums of money in acquiring a chain of cinemas in the UK and purchased Elstree Studios. Chris Reeve was concerned of their cost-cutting and phoned up Menachem Golan to give him a grilling over the phone, which Golan recalls when speaking with Chris's agent. This was captured in the documentary The Last Moguls back in 1986, directed by Christopher Sykes. Reeve complained why they didn't have an extra $1.5 million to shoot in New York when they are planning to make Superman 4 with the intended budget of $30 million. Chris felt they had an axe over their heads, which Menachem didn't like and felt Chris overstepped his boundaries. Menachem's argument was that he didn't want to go bonkers with the budget and stressed he liked the script and wanted to make it for Chris, but wouldn't insult him by saying he was only valuable playing Superman. The production team would get to shoot in Harlem, but only for 3 days. The locations in Montreal were set dressed to cover up the French signs. Chris was amazed how the art department made Montreal blend with New York. The cost cutting ended up saving the Cannon Group between $1 to $2 million. Golan and Globus, relying on their action movie instincts, were wanting more action thrown in, asking Chris to provide more gunfights in the ghettos, but Chris refused. As the ending only contained one shootout, Golan and Globus continued to pressure Chris and the director Jerry for more action, but they were always vetoed. While on set, Chris was watching the scenes with Morgan Freeman, and the director Jerry Schatzberg said Chris believed Freeman was stealing scene after scene. The director went on to say the problem with Chris was that he didn't realise how good Morgan was, and when we saw Morgan, he wanted me to change the film to lessen Morgan's part. And I wouldn't do it, Schatzberg said. Morgan was sensational. When Chris saw the film, he said Morgan could take a cliched moment and make it real. He was not surprised that Freeman would receive an Oscar nomination. Despite being the lead, Chris Reeve's performance would largely be ignored by the critics, with the focus on Freeman and Baker. The film opens with Jonathan pitching a series of ideas to his editor, and he settles on a story of getting the readers inside the mind of a pimp, and to find out what makes them tick, which the editor Ted finds intriguing, but gives Jonathan a very short deadline to meet. He does some investigating but gets little information, meeting Punchy, who refuses to speak freely on the business. Across town, Pimp Fast Black is doing his rounds and beats up a patron for assaulting one of his girls. The guy has a fatal heart attack, and Fast Black is indicted for second-degree murder. After an attempt by his girlfriend Allison to help approach the nightlife goes disastrously wrong, John in his desperation invents a story of a pimp named Tyrone. The story is exceptionally well received by Ted and the magazine's readership. John is ashamed and amazed he got away with his fake article. He soon comes under pressure from Ted, who is eager to meet Tyrone, and the Assistant District Attorney Leonard Pike visits John at his home. Angry that John's story has popularised Smalls, just when he's going before the court, John denies that Tyrone and Smalls are the same person, but Pike does not believe him. Smalls is shown the article and doesn't believe it to be him, but his legal representative thinks different. Jonathan is lured into TV stardom as a result of his article, hosting a news segment called Street Smart, about people using their street smarts on the streets of New York City. Smalls' lawyer subpoenas the notes of John's article. Knowing that the magazine will refuse, their refusal will imply to a jury that they exonerate Smalls of the murder. Jonathan goes back to meet Punchy to get more information from her for his new show, and starts to become romantically involved. Punchy introduces John to Smalls. Smalls tells John his article was stupid, and decides to fill him on the real streets of New York. Despite his often charming exterior, Smalls remains violent and unpredictable. He nearly knifes his favourite prostitute Darlene when he believes she is skimming her takings. Jonathan sets up a meeting with Smalls and his editor, and Smalls attends a magazine fundraiser as the guest of honour. Allison spots John and Punchy getting too close, causing Allison to break up with him. Smalls, who knows the article wasn't about him, asks Jonathan to create notes that show that their interview coincided with the murder, therefore giving him an alibi. Street Smart is a movie probably many have heard of, but haven't actually had the chance to watch. I first heard about it in the late 90s, when I was looking into Superman 4's production, and Street Smart kept popping up, due to the fact on how Christopher Reeve got involved with Cannon Films. Trying to find it on VHS was a chore back then, When it came to DVD, I recall it being pretty pricey on import, and the Blu-ray that did come out is now out of print and fetches high prices, so for those who did manage to watch it in recent years, was thanks to Netflix. With MGM owning the vast majority of Canon's library, they haven't done a good job of re-releasing their back catalogue worldwide, and now with the studio in the hands of Amazon, that may change, but Street Smart falls into that category of a forgotten classic. I did manage to see this film as part of a double bill with Superman 4 a few years ago. Both 35mm presentations, and the prints were in great condition. I'm guessing they probably played for a week or two in the UK and went straight into storage. I can see why Christopher Reeve wanted to move away from Superman and anything similar in that vein, and go for a film that is a human interest story, all downplayed to a realistic gritty story of lies, abuse and prostitution, going against what he had been typecast. Back then he was only seen as Superman. I think for actors now it's a lot easier to avoid that route. I think at the time it was seen as quite daring for Reeve to take on a film that was going against what the public saw him as many of the actors of the Marvel and DC world of movies, they have managed to get work outside of just playing a superhero. But for Chris at this point in time in the 80s, it was far more of an uphill struggle, and he would have to play Superman again to make this film a reality. It's always interesting seeing Chris step outside of playing the Man of Steel, but it's also hard to disassociate him from the character because he did it so well. Strangely again in Street Smart he plays a reporter, not a clumsy Clark Kent, but he is somewhat in the same line of work, and Chris even seems to be supporting a Superman hairdo. For a film that was apparently a pet project for Chris, he honestly doesn't really seem that interested in playing the part in many moments. His performance seems a bit subdued. He is more dialed back and playing it straight, and there is nothing wrong with that. He gets his moments to lose his temper and fight back, to correct his mistakes by creating fake notes to avoid jail time, and then getting revenge on Fast Black. But the majority of the time he doesn't really command the screen. He has this awkward persona throughout, which is best shown when confronted with Fast Black. One side he appears scared of him, but also struggles to fit in. Jonathan, having this upper class background, having gone to Harvard and associating himself with the social elite, and then having to mingle with, I suppose, the lower class, is often trying his best to be careful what he says, and when he does try to act supportive, Fast Black says he's being patronising like all the others he hangs around with. Jonathan's new role as a TV presenter seems to come out of left field. He is a writer who is then suddenly thrown on TV to host his own show, just based on one article he wrote. As he gets into trouble with the law, he is still allowed to host this show. I don't really buy the idea that he made the leap from writing to presenting so quickly. I think for Chris to break away from being typecast as Superman, I think he should have taken on more of the big action roles. That could have worked for him to break that mould. Chris admitted he made many bad decisions in the roles he chose during this decade, and perhaps going for roles that were safer or more commercial to the general public could have kept him on top. Morgan Freeman, who has happily said many times that this is one of his favourite roles, steals the film, completely takes over, leaving Chris pretty much pushed aside as Morgan lights up the screen with his charismatic but threatening persona, a guy who can charm you but instantly snap and threaten to kill you. He makes his performance very compelling and addictive to watch. He keeps you glued to all the scenes he is in. If Morgan wasn't cast and someone of lesser talent was in Street Smart, it would have been remembered as just another failure of Christopher Reeve's resume outside of Superman. Kathy as Punchy does a great job with her role, great emotional range, and holds her own against Reeve and Freeman. The additional supporting characters are for the most part cast well. Mimi Rogers is perfectly fine, as is Jay Patterson and Eric King. But Andre Gregory as Ted Avery feels totally out of place with his performance. He doesn't seem to fit the character of this powerful publisher, and comes across as this weaselly slimeball. It's like the actor thinks he's in a comedy or something. He just doesn't seem to fit the movie. For a film on a tiny budget, it's shot very well by cinematographer Adam Hollander, who shot classics such as Midnight Cowboy. If you look at that movie for example, Street Smart takes on a similar look with its style and camera movements. Jerry directs the film with confidence, nothing is flashy and played out with minimal camera setups, probably as a result of the low budget, but that approach does benefit the film, with many scenes done in one take, which is impressive and does help in pulling you into the scene, especially with the dramatic moments between Smalls and Punchy, where he threatens to cut her eye out. It's a tough scene to watch and very dark, and another great example is when he confronts Fisher in the bathroom. Such a tiny set and claustrophobic in its nature, it really puts Reeve's character on edge, getting so close to death. This is the iconic moment from the film, demonstrating the power of Freeman's performance and how deadly he is as Fast Black. The film score would be produced by Robert Irving III and Miles Davis, which would never get released, but if you check out Miles Davis's album Tutu from 1986, a lot of the music sounds very familiar. The music does its job to fit the tone and capture the feeling of New York, but it could have done with something more menacing instead of incorporating a lot of jazz. There are some slower moments with a bass line to show the darker side of Smalls, but a lot of the film tends not to have much original score and often relies on licensed songs. The ending, in all honesty, is a bit of a letdown. It comes around too quickly and ends abruptly, feeling quite rushed. You're watching it, then suddenly the credits are rolling. You're like, oh, is that the end? It finishes up with Fast Black getting shot by his close friend Reggie. Jonathan has to play dirty to get revenge by framing Reggie. It's played out well with the performances, but I think more could have been done to get rid of Fast Black in a more creative way, instead of just ending with a quick shooting. It is a massive shame Street Smart failed due to the lack of interest from Cannon Films. The film is certainly recommended, but it's not feel-good entertainment. It's a serious thriller dealing with tough subjects. It does feel like a movie from the 1970s, and probably would have done better if released 10 years earlier, but by the late 80s, maybe audiences were wanting something more fun and light-hearted. Cannon Films weren't afraid to do smaller human interest features. We know them for producing schlocky action films with Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson. This, like Barfly for example, shows Golan and Globus were willing to take risks, but they spread themselves too thin. So these movies got little support once released. They just wanted Reeve to play Superman to guarantee box office success, but they cut corners on that, thus doing more damage to their studio and ruining Christopher Reeve's career as a lead for a number of years. Having a string of box office failures on your resume is not good in Hollywood. But it did give Morgan Freeman the leg up he needed as an actor, and since the late 80s, he became one of the most respected actors in the industry.